Alright, so back with another video, this time more on Britney Spears. So after making the last video, I did some more research and I ran into this article. So, yeah. What video clips of Britney Spears yelling at her kids do and don't tell us? So, first off, I just wanted to go back so you can see this. As a psychotherapist, this is what I saw in the video clips of Britney Spears yelling at her kids. Okay, so gonna just disclose, I am myself a therapist. So the reason that I wanted to do this video is to kind of just look at our different perspectives on this and kind of see what hers are and just kind of analyze and talk about it. Not to make this therapist wrong at all, because I mean, I read the first part up here and I agree, but then there's some of it that I don't agree with. So, and of course, obviously, every therapist, every clinician is going to have a different perspective based on their own life view, based on their background, their experiences, and their education. But I would say, I mean, we'll get into it, but if this therapist doesn't see anything at all wrong with that video, that's where I would be concerned. Even though I get what she's saying, because here we have, okay, we'll just read this. No parent can ever be perfect, but we live in a world where even a snapshot of imperfection, that is being human, is viewed as being a failure. So basically, people are, getting on, being kind of hard on Britney Spears about this. And I agree with what this therapist is saying, that we don't really know the context, and this could just be a snapshot of imperfection, of her being human, and people could be, and yeah, I agree with that. If you just have one snapshot of, something, or one video of something that happened. But my only thing with that is, it wasn't really a snapshot. I mean, we had two different encounters. Then when I was going through YouTube, I also saw another encounter in the past. And again, so it doesn't mean, here's the thing to look at. Like, abuse is a pattern. Emotional abuse even is a pattern of behavior. So yes, what this therapist is saying makes sense, that we don't really know because we only have a few snapshots, a few videos to really let us know, like, is this a pattern? But I will tell you, with some of the stuff I saw, it's hard, how do I put this? If she's talking to them in those videos in that way, it's hard for me to believe that that's just a snapshot in time, because it sounds like that's, and I'm not talking about the yelling aspect, I'm talking about like the actual things she's saying to them and how she's approaching it. So even though they're snapshots in time, it still points to unhealthy and toxic parenting skills on her part, or a lack of healthy parenting skills on her part. Now, again, does that mean that she's a failure? No, absolutely not. But it means that she needs some work on her parenting skills, and I think we need to, again, be honest about these things. Anyway, let's go through this. So, whatever you think of Britney Spears and Kevin Federline, blah, blah, blah. Parenting is no longer a private activity. I'm not sure why it would have to be. It's kind of a weird thing to say. I mean, I get it, because obviously the internet, but I don't know, it's just kind of a weird whatever. Federline apparently wanted to show that Spears had been a bad mom, and that is what has caused a strain in a relationship with their now 15 and 16-year-old boys. But what did he actually prove? That no parent is perfect. I just want to point something out. Definitely she's like assuming and jumping to conclusions. Like, we don't know that that was what Kevin Federline's motive was for releasing those videos. Maybe he legitimately wanted to release those videos to show the reality of what was going on. Now, maybe he did do it to smear her character. Narcissists are known to do that all the time. And I don't know, so let's go through this. And the attention of these videos captures a conundrum of contemporary parenting. While we know that no parent can ever be perfect, we live in a world where being imperfect is viewed as being... The attention of these videos captures, okay. The truth is just, yeah, of course, yes. Okay, so of course humans are gonna have meltdowns and shit like that. You're right. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not gonna happen. And I think that there was enough time for her to practice enough mindfulness to be like, oh, wait a sec, this is not appropriate. I mean, the lack of boundaries does point to this being more than a snapshot in time, because obviously you're not going to just not have boundaries on two different videos and then go back to having boundaries in real life. So that's also something we kind of have to look at here too, is like, if you don't have boundaries in the way that you're showing in the video, that's probably true across the board, or like that's probably true across your interactions with these kids. That's not just going to change. It seems like there's a boundary issue there, and there's a lack of anyway, let's see. Yep, between public judgment in the sense that imperfection is synonymous with inadequacy. I feel like I never get it right. I'm always worrying if I'm doing a terrible job as a parent. Oh my goodness. Oh no, the pendulum has swung from the days when the mental health world blamed an individual's problems on their internal psychological conflicts. Today it seems that everything is the parent's fault. Because, whoa, this is manipulative, you guys. I'm so sorry. This part is really manipulative because a child, like, so she's essentially insinuating from the statement that the pendulum is swung and we're not putting the blame on the children where it should be. We're putting it on the parent. So essentially, you're saying that it's an internal psychological conflict on the kid's part, that they set a boundary and their mom disrespected it and stepped over it. I mean, this just sounds like gaslighting, because when we're talking about kids, I mean, in these videos, that was her fault. So that's manipulative, because we're not saying everything is the parent's fault or everything is her fault, but we're just looking at, and on top of it, that's kind of an ignorant statement to make, because as a therapist, one of the things that I know is that your childhood impacts the rest of your life. There's been obviously tons and tons of research done on this, and obviously we've seen it with the people in this country. So like the kids who go and, shoot up schools. I'm not saying that that's the parents' fault. Some of those kids might be psychopaths and born that way. However, that's also different. I mean, we're talking about internal psychological conflicts. Yeah, a mass school shooter who goes and shoots up a school. Yeah, that's a personal problem. Now, did parenting have something to do with it? Maybe, maybe not. Again, we don't know if they're a psychopath. But when we're talking about allowing access to a gun, I mean, yeah, that is your fault that you allowed your child access to a gun to kill people, when, I mean, there should have been signs. I mean, there were signs that his mental health was not up to par, and that should have been taken into consideration. So yeah, that's the parent's fault for not setting boundaries. Again, this goes back to boundaries. It's not about everything's the parent's fault, but when you don't set boundaries with your kids, when you don't stay consistent, when you don't respect their boundaries, then that's not okay. That's not an internal psychological conflict going on with the child. That's an issue with the parent not having boundaries and not teaching appropriate boundary skills. So yeah, everything goes back to the parent. No, not everything is the parent's fault. But a lot of what ends up happening to kids and how they grow and how they end up developing into who they are, a huge influence on that is parenting. I mean, parenting makes or breaks a sociopath. So like a psychopath is born, a sociopath is made. You see what I mean? So you can be such a shitty parent that you can create a sociopath out of your child. So yeah, everything. I actually want to restate this. I think everything really does go back to the parents, yes. Unless it's some type of them being born as a psychopath or them having some other mental illness like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or something, which again doesn't really show up until a little bit later, especially schizophrenia. But yeah, we're not talking about that. So I don't know what she means by internal psychological conflicts, but it's not an internal psychological conflict to set a boundary with your mom and then have anxiety because she reacts inappropriately to your boundary. No, I'm sorry. That's an internal psychological conflict on her part, not theirs. Moving on. To be clear, we must recognize the role of parenting in a child's development and acknowledge the terrible consequences of abuse or maltreatment by parents and the fact that it continues to be a serious problem worldwide. Yelling, name-calling, and hurtful words can do psychological damage. Yup. But there are also some instances in which parents do not need to worry that yelling has damaged their kids. For example, when it is an unusual occurrence and when there's space for the genuine repair of the rupture between parent and child. Yeah, but yeah, okay. I get, again, that kind of points to what I was saying earlier about like when abuse is a pattern of behavior. So if it's just one occurrence or a few occurrences, that doesn't mean that she's an abuser, but it does point to toxic parenting. Let's see. And for people already anxious about their performance as parents, the knowledge that others are watching and judging them, blah, blah, blah. All this just seems like rhetoric, very convoluted. Public figures like Spears constantly deal with having their imperfections flaunt into the world, but when parents become self-conscious about their behaviors, they sometimes cannot behave in the ways that would be most beneficial to their children. While Federline's Instagram post claimed that this isn't even the worst of it, many of the responses seem to side with Spears, and what the public did see... What? While Federline's Instagram post claimed that this isn't even the worst of it, many of the responses seem to side with Spears. Oh. And of course... they seem to side with Spears because, yeah, anyway. And what the public did see and hear point to another part of the parenting conundrum. Abuse is not as easily as identified as it might seem, in part at least because a single moment in time is not necessarily a good indication of what really goes on in any family or any situation. Again, yes, pointing back to the pattern of abuse. It's a pattern. It's not just one instance, but we've seen a few different instances on camera of Britney Spears at this point, so I will say that. There we go. It can be a sign of bad parenting, but it does not always represent abuse. That's great, but it just seems like a bunch of like... Yeah, okay. Hmm. I have no idea if Spears was being honest with her sons and whether or not she was doing damage to the kids. That's an ignorant statement. You just said yelling and all that shit can do damage. And in isolated circumstances, even if it is isolated, that still does damage. It's still anxiety provoking for a child to be yelled at. So yeah, definitely what she did was damaging. And we don't have it wasn't a single snapshot. It was a couple different snapshots. So, all right, that's it.